I think this advice makes sense, but I don't hear people talking about it that often. Buongiorno and welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, my name is Arlene. I am an American woman of a certain age who moved to Rome in 2008. And on this channel, we talk about all things Italiano, lifestyle, St. Martin, and Anguilla. And today we're talking about moving to Italy. This is for people who are thinking about moving to Italy or who are getting ready to move to Italy. So if it's the latter, let's say you have your visa, you know where you're going to live, everything is ready, set, go. One thing I don't hear a lot of people talking about when they give advice about moving to Italy, and sometimes they even dismiss this advice, is to learn as much Italian as you can before you move here. Now, this may sound very basic, or of course, why wouldn't I? But it's fascinating because I have seen people say on social media, oh, you're moving to Rome, you're moving to Florence, don't stress out. Everybody speaks English, no biggie. This is the thing, moving is stressful. Moving from one city to another, it's stressful. Or moving from one house to another, even within the same town or in the same city. Moving internationally, new country, new culture, that is very stressful. Even if you are the most organized person that ever lived, it's going to be stressful. It's a lot. And I think it's helpful to learn as much Italian as you can before you get here, because once you arrive, you're going to be so busy getting settled. Maybe once you arrive, you're going to be so busy trying to set up your new life in your new country that you won't have time to study Italian, whether it's at a school or with a private tutor. And I think it's important to learn the language of the country that you're living in. I think you really miss a lot when you are not able to speak the language. Yes, it's possible to get by. I've met people in Rome and Florence who have lived there for over 20 years and they can barely speak Italian. It's because they're in this expat bubble, as they say. I think it's kind of funny to call them expats when you've lived in Italy for over 20 years, you're married to an Italian and you have children who grew up here, but yet you call yourself an expat. But that's a discussion for another time. 20 plus years and can barely speak the language. I feel that's a disadvantage for practical reasons and then also for emotional reasons. On the practical side, for example, one of my friends who does speak Italian fluently, she's married to an Italian, she's American. She had an emergency at work and had to be rushed to the hospital, and then she had to be rushed into surgery. Her husband, meanwhile, was in meetings like back to back, and by the time he actually checked his phone or the message got to him that his wife was in emergency surgery, she was already she was already admitted, and she was able to communicate with the doctors, the nurses, everything that was going on. Some of the doctors and some of the nurses did speak English, but you cannot make that assumption that everyone you meet here speaks. I would say with the younger generation, yes, most of them study English in school, and because of social media, globalization, they're exposed to more English language. They probably watch movies in original language versus always watching movies dubbed. And the older generation, I would say, older millennial, Gen X, boomers, they may not speak English fluently, especially once you get out of the larger cities and away from places that are very touristy. You don't want to be in a situation where you don't understand what's happening or what's going on because you don't speak the language. Then I think the emotional reason is that it's hard to be with a group of people and everybody has to speak English because you don't speak Italian. You're out with your Italian friends, and I hear Americans in particular say all the time, oh, it's really hard to make Italian friends because everybody's known each other since they were 5 years old, and da-da-da. Part of the problem is also the language barrier. It's hard to join in a conversation, everybody speaking Italian, and then everyone switches to English so that you feel comfortable and you could feel part of the conversation. But sometimes you don't want to speak English. If you're Italian, you want to speak your mother tongue. I, living in the United States, speaking English, if I had an Italian friend who was visiting Los Angeles and didn't speak a word of English, yes, I would try to only speak Italian with that person, but sometimes it's hard, right? Because Italian's not my mother tongue. It's not the language that I feel the most comfortable in. And I don't know if I will ever be truly bilingual. I hope to reach an advanced level of Italian, but for me, because I work a lot in English and I'm not married to an Italian, I do not have an Italian boyfriend, I speak a lot of English. I try now to speak more Italian with my Italian friends, but this is key. Someone said to me once, the language that you meet someone with is the language that you default to. So I've noticed that my friends in Rome, most of my Italian friends there speak English fluently. A lot of them had either worked in the States or they went to grad school in the States. Some went to grad school in London. And so when I first moved there and my Italian was, it was decent for someone who, never lived in the country before, we would speak in English because they wanted me to be able to participate in the conversations when we went out for dinners and things like that. And now, my Italian is much stronger. I find that I still default to English with them because it feels weird to speak Italian with them, even though they are Italian. Meanwhile, the Italians that I have met since my Italian improved, we speak in Italian because that's the language that I know them in. I'm trying here in Milan, I moved here about 3 months ago, to only speak Italians with the Italians that I meet here, even if they speak English fluently, because I know myself, I know if we start out in English, that is going to be the language that I associate with them, and it will be very hard for me to switch later on. So where can you learn Italian if you don't live in Italy? If you live in a major city or near a major city, I would check out the Italian Cultural Institute. It is a part of the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It is a great, great, great resource. Not only do they offer Italian classes at all different levels, but they also have different cultural events. For example, sometimes an Italian author or filmmaker will be in town and they will have screenings, they have readings. It's really fantastic. I took classes at the Italian Cultural Institute in Los Angeles, which was located in Westwood, and I met some great people. Of course, it's LA, so some of the people in the class were actors, and one of them actually lives in Italy now, and we've become really good friends. And it was fantastic. We would go to screenings there, to book signings. They would have like aperitivo. And again, like I said, because it was Los Angeles, sometimes I would go in there and I'd bump into the most random actors, like, oh, you're studying Italian? Is it for a movie? They're like, no, I'm going, on a trip and I wanted to learn. So that was when I moved to Rome because, again, it was a big international move and things were quite hectic. Plus work was very intense. I was not taking any Italian classes. I was not in school or anything like that. And my Italian it wasn't until I went back to classes that I got back to the level I was when I first moved here. But again, I just think it's really important. If you're thinking about moving to Italy, it's also great to learn the language because I think it's fun and will make you more excited about your move. But yeah, I don't understand how people can say to somebody who is moving to a new country, don't worry about learning the language of that new country because, everybody speaks English. No, first of all, that's not true. Outside of, like I said, areas that are very touristy or have a large English-speaking immigrant or expat community, no, everybody doesn't speak English. And also, I don't understand why we would assume everybody would speak English. I think that's weird. We're in Italy. People speak Italian. I mean, speaking restaurant Italian, I guess, is okay, but you're not really living here. You're just kind of on the surface, right? And I think that could be frustrating because I have another thing I've noticed. The American women I met who are married to Italian men, so they moved to Italy because of the man, not because they had a special, love for the country. And they would speak only English at home with their spouse, and they didn't really speak Italian with them. They found it very hard to integrate here and to make a life here. And some of them, they're not working because they're stay-at-home moms. And that could be very isolating because then you're truly in this bubble, especially if the kids are going to an international school. So I, again, cannot stress how important it is to try to learn the language. I find Italians are very forgiving when you speak Italian, unlike some other countries, which we will not say which. When you make mistakes, because Italian grammar, it's not easy, especially for mother tongue English. For example, congiuntivo. Like in English, how many times do you hear people say, if I was you, I wouldn't do this? Well, really, the proper grammar is if I were you. And it's just a tense that we don't use a lot in English, but it's used so much in Italian. Anytime you say, I think, I believe, I hope. Also, passato remoto, which is a past tense, used a lot in writing, and also, I believe, mostly in Sicily, in the South. Even children's book. I'll never forget reading The Cat in the Hat in Italian because someone said to me, read children's books, especially books that you already know, because it will just help you with the language. And I'm looking at this book and I'm like, why is there like congiuntivo and passato remoto in this kid's book? Why? What is helpful is listening to Italian music and, listening to it, then print out the lyrics in Italian, read the lyrics while you're listening to the song or singing along with the song, and then go ahead and print out, the English lyrics. Because of streaming, we have so much more access now. So you can watch Italian films, Italian TV shows, watch them with Italian subtitles, so you are hearing and reading at the same time, which is great for comprehension. And then if you're completely lost, turn on the English subtitles. I find that helps a lot to consume as much Italian media as you can. I think this is helpful for people who are not living in Italy yet, because you're not going to hear Italian all the time. You're not immersed in it. And maybe you don't have time to go to Italian classes or to do online classes. So this, I think, will help you a lot. And then once you move here and you're immersed in a language, you can take classes to help you with grammar. I've met fellow Americans here who speak Italian fluently, but never studied Italian. And then they went back to just bone up on the grammar because, again, Italian grammar is not like English grammar. And so their vocabularies are a lot stronger than, for example, my vocabulary. Also, my friends here who work at Italian companies, obviously, they speak Italian very well and they write Italian very well because they are using it every single day and they're using it in a work environment. I had been living in Rome for maybe a year, and I was having coffee with my friend Gian Piero, and we bumped into an Italian friend of his, and that friend said to me, you know what? You don't know a lot of Italian words, but the ones you know, you say them very well. I actually thought that was a compliment. I was not offended at all because, as I said, I was working in English only, living alone. And then when I would meet friends for aperitivo or coffee, my Italian friends pretty much speak in English. And then, of course, I met so many Americans and people from the UK and from Canada and Australia, and we would all obviously speak English with each other. So, and even, meeting people from Germany and Spain, again, we would speak English because that was the common language amongst all of us. So I found it very difficult to make the switch. And when I interned for an Italian interior designer, that's when I realized, like, oh, my Italian is, oh, I do not speak Italian. Because one day they all left the showroom because they had to go pick up something at a client. and I was the only one there, and the phone rings and I pick up and I say, Buongiorno, blah, 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 studio. And the person just, is speaking Italian fluently, quickly. And, I find on the phone is challenging even now. So you could imagine back then. And the person was very kind, but I could tell irritated, because why is she calling a business in Rome and the person picking up the phone seems to be struggling with Italian? That makes no sense. So after that experience, I started taking classes again, and it was very, very helpful. And I also worked with a private teacher. And for me, my issue now is that I just need to stop worrying about making mistakes and just speak. Because when I do speak Italian, people are like, oh, you speak Italian. Why were we speaking in English? Because again, it's a comfort thing. One thing I do notice is when I'm working on projects here in Italy, interior design projects or decorating projects, my Italian, again, is so much stronger because I'm actually working in Italy. And it doesn't matter what language my clients are speaking to me. Everybody I work with, all the trades people, all the vendors, everybody else is speaking Italian. And some of them, like my carpenter, he doesn't speak a word of English, like not a single word, none. So obviously, when we are having things custom made, it's very important that I am precise and clear in what I'm saying so there are no mistakes. But that's also another reason why I am a fan of writing everything down. Like I send a lot of emails and texts so that it's in writing, so there are no miscommunications. But for me, once I started working in Italy, that's, again, obviously my Italian improved by leaps and bounds. Also, the type of work I do, it's not Italian that would come up really in everyday conversation, because some of it's very technical and very specific. But I am trying to get better, and I would like to reach an advanced level of Italian. That's my goal. I noticed that here in Milan, I do speak more Italian than I did in Rome. When I walk into a store, people don't automatically speak to me in English. They speak to me in Italian. And if I'm kind of like struggling a bit, then they'll switch to English. But in Rome, I would walk into a store, especially in the historic center, and they would say, Buongiorno, how can I help you? I'm trying my best. I feel I lost a lot of ground, obviously, during COVID, because I was in the Caribbean for 5.5 months. I was in St. Martin because the airport was closed. I could not get back to Italy. And I was not speaking any Italian while I was there. I was listening to it, and I would try to watch, Italian movies, but it's not the same as communicating with somebody, speaking with somebody face to face. I feel I am much better on the phone. Like when I moved here, I had to call like Sky and Vodafone and all these places, and I made it through. Do not listen to people online who tell you, don't worry about speaking Italian when you move to Italy, especially if you're moving to Rome or Florence. Everybody speaks English. No. Even if you're not going to work here, you are working remotely, or you are going to be a stay-at-home parent, learn the language. Before you come to Italy, to learn as much as you can, because that's one less thing you will have to stress out about when you get here. And it will give you a foundation to grow from. It's really helpful because you already know some, let's say you're like beginner level, and then you go to class and then you improve, or maybe you're somebody who doesn't need like formal instruction. You learn from hearing and you just pick it up easily and you are able to communicate. It's a whole world will open up to you when you know the language, and you miss out on so much when you don't. And honest, I think it's a bit disrespectful to be so dismissive and have this attitude of, well, I'm American. Everybody speaks English. I don't need to learn Italian, even though I'm going to live in Italy. What is that? And I bet people who feel that way are probably the same people who get really offended when they're in the States and people are not speaking English. So come on. Just at least try. No one's saying that you have to be fluent and you can read, literary fiction in Italian and you can, pontificate on really complicated issues and da-da. But I see people who don't even try. They don't make an attempt. They really don't care. They're just like in this expat bubble for years, for decades. And they're just like, whoa, yeah, don't do that. And once you get out of the major cities, if you're moving to a small village in the middle of the countryside, yeah, you're going to need to learn how to speak some Italian. I don't know why people would assume people in this small village, everybody would speak English. Again, the younger people might, but not the older people. And how can you communicate? You're going to miss out. And people really appreciate it when you try to speak their language. They really do. And again, in Italy, overall, I'm not saying every place in the entire country, but I find that people here are very welcoming when you try to speak Italian, and they are not as impatient as other places. So that is my advice for people who are moving to Italy, thinking about moving to Italy. Try to learn as much of the language as you can. So I hope this was helpful. Do not listen to the people who say you don't need to know Italian. That's ridiculous. Thank you for watching. If you're a subscriber, thank you for subscribing. If not, please hit the like and subscribe button. It will help grow the channel. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend. Ciao, ciao for now.